Okay, about the reader. Um, I made a mistake in all the chaos of digital files. I accidentally uploaded to your classes the wrong reader, a reader from a few years ago. Um, the questions didn't correspond to the numbers in the reader, and a lot of the articles were actually not even in the reader. And then, I got a handful, maybe 12, 15 messages, kids that were like, hey, these numbers don't make sense or the articles aren't here. And some kids just did their best and tried to answer. So I would look at their homework and it said like, you didn't include an article, but in class you said, or I didn't really understand how this article was relevant, so I looked it up online, and kids did their best to answer with other sources, which I thought was, like um, it's nice that they tried. That's all good. That's a student trying their best. But what was fascinating, there were about 20 kids who just wrote answers, turned it in, and they're just pure BS. Just straight up made up answers. Nothing to do with the reader. They just babbled about the topic as if they were, you know, discussing the reader, which they don't have. I just really wonder what students think they're supposed to be doing. Like, oh, this is such BS. I'm not even going to look at the reader. I'm just going to turn in some stuff on paper. Like, kind of like why are we here, like as students or a teacher for this class. This was really fascinating to me. Um, I apologize that I sent out the wrong reader. That's my bad. um, I figured it out after a bunch of kids had already tried to do the work. So I'm just going to remove any questions that are directly from the reader. And then for students who want this content, I'll include it in the review materials, because I think the content was relevant. I'm also going to tell you about the content later in this video, but I just gotta wonder, like if you're just faking the homework, what's in it for you, like I don't know. This was a fascinating experience for me. I'm still trying to digest what this all means. um the reader was messed up, so for anybody who wants to know what it should have been, number 43 was a life cycle assessment. um, Well to wheels is a way to say, what are the environmental impacts from the source, the well where you get the petroleum. What are the impacts from the source until you actually use the energy for the wheels, to drive. And this is something that was supposed to wrap up the car lot of the future. So for everybody who participated in the car lot of the future, you already got all this information. I was trying to give you a table that had numbers for how much carbon is produced in the manufacture of an electric car or whatever. Um, but I guess you've already got the concepts from the car lot of the future, so I don't really feel too bad about this one. Number 44 was a really thoughtful article about the pro and the con debate of fracking. Again, a lot of this came up in class, but in case you don't have it, you should probably know. Pros are that natural gas is profitable, and we've talked about that. It makes less CO2 per unit of energy because it burns more efficiently. We've talked about that. It has less impurities, so it makes less mercury, less chemicals that cause smog. Less soot So like it's got less particulate in it, so it doesn't really make any particulate smoke. That would be new, I think. I'm not sure that I had told you that in class. So there's usually a reason to read the articles. I think we mentioned in class that the mines are smaller than coal burning or petroleum power plants. And I think we have discussed in class that there are some new jobs associated with natural gas because it's a growing industry. Um, Cons, arguments against fracking also came up in class. Fracking uses a lot of water. We've talked about pollution of groundwater or surface water from the ponds at the surface. I don't think I ever said clearly that some amount of methane escapes to the environment, and methane leakage is a greenhouse gas problem. Methane is itself a greenhouse gas. So this would have been another important reason to read the article. You already know that subsidence is possible, land sinking, that's from another study goal in your book. The extraction process does use traditional energy, so you could, of course, talk about the carbon cost of the extraction itself. And I did mention that it's loud, right? Some people consider this noise pollution. I sure do, it's really loud. And I think we talked in class about the disposal of fracking fluid. So I feel like you got most of this stuff in class, but I wish I'd given you the right article. The term negawatt was in this version of the reader, but I think it may have had the wrong number attached. So kids who read the reader were able to answer this, but a few kids pointed out that the number was wrong. Negawatt is an abbreviation for negative wattage, which is like electrical efficiency, you know, like lowering your wattage consumption, negawatt, negative wattage. So for number 50, we've already talked about the nuclear debate. By the time I got to that lecture, I realized you didn't have the reader, so I included this information in a previous lecture. I think it's titled The Nuclear Debate. Number 51 was in your reader. It may have had the wrong number, or maybe it wasn't numbered at all, actually, I think, in the reader that you got. But we have discussed this in class often. Biofuels are a really good way to lower climate change because biofuels are current carbon. When you burn alcohol made from corn, the CO2 that goes into the air was just in the air. CO2 was made into corn. The corn used photosynthesis to grab CO2 from the air. So when you use that corn sugar to make alcohol and you put that into a car, the CO2 is current CO2. It's not new or extra. You're not adding greenhouse gases when you burn biofuels. Of course, the problem of agricultural ethanol is that you're using a whole bunch of fossil fuels to grow the corn because of the tractors and because of the processing of the ethanol. So it's unfortunate that we make biofuels from agricultural sources. Ethanol would be awesome. It would be a really good way to lower climate change if we could find ethanol sources that aren't agricultural, that we don't have to grow. So like agricultural waste would be nice because you're not growing it for the ethanol, you're growing it for something else, and then you can make ethanol from waste. And then number 52, again, I've included this elsewhere in our class because I realized it wasn't in your reader, was the radioactivity dosage chart. This was in a separate lecture already. Before I stop this video, I want to encourage you to get something for your time. Like if you're just scribbling BS for the homework, like you're making class pointless. Like, you're sitting there doing that for no benefit to you. Those notes don't do you any good, so why are you writing them? And if you're just hustling for homework points, how's that going to help you on an exam? What if I chose to put these questions on a test? I really have concern for some of my students. Make notes that are useful to you for you. That's just a good strategy for life at school. Again, I apologize for sending the wrong reader. I will make that available in the review materials for anybody who wants to read the original sources. Okay.